Thanks for joining us on our streaming service for your First Alert Avalanche Report. I'm your First Alert meteorologist, Callie Zanandri, and joining me is the Deputy Director of the Colorado Avalanche Information Center, Brian Lazar. Brian, we've had temperatures well above normal. It's felt like April out there. How is that impacting conditions?
Yeah, it has been unseasonably warm, and unfortunately it's taken a bit of a toll on our snowpack. You can see here that the lack of snowfall in the latter part of January and the early part of February combined with these record high temperatures has really diminished our snowpack across the state, where we sit at 84% of long-term median. The warm temperatures this past week were enough to actually generate a pretty widespread cycle of wet avalanche activity that is more common in April, for example. But I'm hoping for a pattern change coming up this week.
Yeah, all the models indicate that we're turning towards a cooler, more active pattern across the region as we approach the middle of the month. How will that play into the avalanche danger?
Yeah, well, the upside, the silver lining to, the end of the warm temperatures and the lack of snowfall is that we have widespread, generally safe avalanche conditions. And that's what's indicated here by all this green on the map. We might even see a little bit more green in the San Juans as we move into Friday and Saturday. So this means most slopes are safe from avalanches. So the main headline as we move through the weekend is that it's a pretty safe time to recreate out there. It does mean that avalanches are really unlikely, except on isolated slopes, but it does not mean that avalanches are impossible. So I want to spend a little bit of time just talking about these isolated slopes where you could still find trouble. And what's driving that danger is wind-drifted snow. Despite the lack of snowfall, it has been a fairly windy week. And we've found, had enough wind to drift snow in the alpine, despite the lack of new snowfall, into thin wind-drifted slabs in these isolated terrain features like what you can see here. And here's another example. What I want to point out are these characteristic terrain features: steep wind-loaded slopes below convex rolls. And if you find areas where you see these shooting cracks, like in this slope, which did not avalanche but produced these shooting cracks, you know you found one of these isolated areas with potentially dangerous wind-drifted snow. Where you're going to find the most dangerous, isolated terrain features are right up near ridgeline, high up in the alpine, below steep convex rolls, in areas with lots of thin rocky spots like what I'm showing here. You can see that most of these avalanches are small because we haven't added a lot of fuel to build thicker and stiffer slabs with our lack of recent snowfall. But you can imagine even getting triggered in a small slide like this and dragged down into the scree field could be potentially dangerous. So if you can avoid these kinds of isolated terrain features, you can recreate pretty safely this weekend. And just one more photo. This one's on Chicago Ridge north of Leadville. Again, you can see that wind drifting snow, which is really indicated by this cornice feature along the ridgeline. Steep convex roll and lots of thin rocky areas was triggered just from all that wind loading. So if we can stay away from these kind of terrain features, you should be in good shape.
The good news is we do have the return of some winter weather this weekend, some snow for the northern mountains. How will this impact conditions moving forward?
Yeah, and despite this pleasant springtime weather, I think those of us in Colorado are all ready to return to more seasonable climate and see snowfall. We're not ready to let go of winter yet. We do have some colder temperatures, which will put all of that wet avalanche activity well into the rearview mirror, and we're looking at the incoming snowfall, which looks to favor the northern mountains, as you can see here: Park Range north of Steamboat, Summit County through the northern Front Range all the way up to the Wyoming border. And those are the areas where we might see an uptick in avalanche danger again from a little bit more fuel to add to that wind-drifted snow. The snowfall may spread down into the southern mountains, but it won't be enough to move the needle. And so we're really looking at a bump to potentially moderate danger, level 2 out of 5, in these areas where you can see kind of, the greens and reds in the northern mountains. And if we can avoid, again, these thin rocky areas like in this photo with fresh wind-drifted snow below, it'll feel stiff underfoot and often present itself like this in these big, bulbous rounded pillows. If you can steer clear of these few little places up in the alpine that harbor this kind of terrain characteristic, we can recreate safely out there this weekend.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Brian, and we'll see you here next week for your First Alert Avalanche Report.
Thank you. See you next week.